着一头极具标志性低马尾的阿兹米沙龙，打破了大家对讲师形象的刻板印象。强烈的个人风格与他自由开放的作风不谋而合。他从事教学工作至今迈入第28个年头，积极捍卫言论自由和民主空间，却在2014年因为评论苏丹权限而被控抵触煽动法令，成为了该法令被提控的第一位学术人士。象牙塔中顿时弥漫着白色恐怖。
Sekarang kita dengar orang adalah orang ya. Dia kata nak guna akta hasutan ni untuk tunjuk kekuatan. Salah. Kalau guna akta hasutan, engkau tunjuk kelemahan.
509改朝换代之后，我国的学术及言论空间是否能有所突破？我们该如何确保对议题的公开讨论不被窒息？这一次的 On the Hot Seat， 我们邀请了阿兹米沙龙与我们分享他的学术之路，也来谈谈今天的马来西亚是不是他心目中的无畏新世界。
各位观众朋友，大家晚上好！看过了刚才的视频，你就知道我们今天的来宾是谁。当然，在我们的访谈节目还没有开始之前，不管你是新朋友或者是老朋友，再一次给大家汇报一下我们节目的一些就是小规则。节目进行当中呢，欢迎各位观众朋友向我们的这个来宾提问。只要在讨论区贴上你们的问题呢，我们制作人觉得适合的话，就会转给我，由我来替你们发问。好，当然还有要提醒一点的是，你可以用任何语文来提问，那我们可以给你做个简短的翻译。如果不是用英文的话，事不宜迟，那我们就展开今天的访问。Hi, Prof.
Hello.
Good evening. Thank
Ni
you
hao.
for... Ni hao. Okay, do you want to conduct this in Chinese?
Yeah, sure. Every question you ask, I'll go, 我不知道.
Wow. I think we can end this very soon if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, anyways, okay, from a lot of your articles, you have never hide the fact that you are a football fan.
Yes.
And now it's the friends, it's the World Cup fever now. What's your prediction?
Well, if I was a betting man, but I'm not because it's illegal, I would bet on Belgium.
But Belgium will be against France, right?
Yeah, no problem. The French are weak. But,
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Belgians are quite solid. I think they underestimated the Japanese and they messed up. But generally, I think they're quite strong. So I'm hoping it'll be someone different. I mean, like, since the World Cup started, there's only been 8 countries which have won. So it's nice to have someone new.
Belgium.
Yeah.
Yep, but it's still from the Europe continent.
There's no one else. You know, Neymar has rolled away.
We are so lack of choices. Okay, anyways, hopefully that, you know, your prediction is going to be a little bit more accurate than what you predict out of the GE14.
That's very bad. That's very naughty.
It shows that I read your article.
Yes, you did. But I wasn't the only one. Nobody thought.
Don't worry, even us.
Yeah, nobody thought this was going to happen, right? Nobody.
But, you know, it has been 2 months. How do you feel now? You have been, you know, observing and following all this development closely ever since the new government coming into place. How do you feel now?
I'm still quite excited. I'm still quite shocked. I'm actually a bit lost because, you know, all my grown-up life I've been fighting Barisan Nasional UMNO. So suddenly I don't know what to do.
So there's no one that you can criticize
I
now?
know. I'm waiting for Pakatan to mess up so I can so I can say something. But it's still very early. I mean, Parliament hasn't even sat. They just sorted out the cabinet. What, yesterday? Yeah, or was it today? The cabinet? No, yesterday. I think the cabinet was just sorted out yesterday. So we still have to wait and see how it's going to work. But so far, I mean, like, really, they're making the right sounds. The Minister of Health is trying to cut the ridiculous kind of spending which is happening via middlemen.
Okay.
The new Minister of Foreign Affairs has said that we want to ratify a whole bunch of human rights treaties, which is very good. And I mean, you know, Malaysia is not even party to the Convention Against Torture.
Yes.
It's like we like torture, you know. so, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
Mujahid, as Minister for Religious Affairs, is also very good because, I mean, he's very knowledgeable, but at the same time, he's got a very progressive mind. He's a very inclusive man. So I think the pieces are in place for a government which could be an excellent government. I mean, they won't be perfect. Nobody's perfect. But the pieces are there, and it's all in place. And I'm hoping that they will prove to this country, and to the Malay voter in particular, that the country can move forward for everyone without having to use the old way of doing things.
Why the Malay voter in particular?
Come on, that is the key demographic which determines the future of this country.
That's true.
All right, we cannot deny that. Okay, we're talking about 60% of the voting population, and they are Malay. And and let's not forget, in the last elections, quite a lot of them still voted for UMNO, still voted for PAS. Right. So if you want a more progressive government, if you want a government which is not obsessed about race, not obsessed about religion, but respects both, then we have to make sure that we don't go back to the old days. All right, and for that to happen, the best way for that to happen is if Pakatan does such a good job that everybody thinks, well, what's the point? This is cool. This is the way it should be. There's no need to go back to the racist kind of things which UMNO used to do. There's no need to be ultra religious like PAS. We can all develop together in a fair and just manner. So that is a big responsibility, and that's their job now. And I think they can do it. They're quite smart. I mean, look at the cabinet. But then, compared to the past, right?
it's not too high.
It's not too hard.
It's not too hard, right?
The standard is not too high.
Oh gosh, we are still bashing them.
I can't help it.
Okay. Anyways, you mentioned that you're waiting for Pakatan Harapan to mess up a little bit so that
So I have something to say.
Yeah, you have something to say. But do you actually? I'm just gonna bring in a little bit of skepticism or whatever. Do you think there is something that you are already watching closely? That some place or some areas that
For sure. I mean, like Mat Sabu recently said that they might not repeal the National Security Council Act.
Yeah.
Okay, now Mat Sabu is cuddly and cute and all the rest of it, but I'm sorry, that is wrong. You promised to get rid of that law. You must get rid of that law. All right? And because it's a bad law. And it's so easily abused. And we already have enough laws to do what the NSC is supposed to do.
Yes.
All right? Because we have emergency provisions, etc. Another thing is that the cabinet only has barely 20% women. Now, they promised 30% of women in policy-making positions, whatever that means, right? Okay, the cabinet is the biggest policy-making body. There should be at least 30% women in the cabinet. Now, I actually believe that quotas has its place, as long as it's done transparently, as long as there's a legitimate reason, and in this case there is a legitimate reason because we're talking about gender equity, and as long as there's a sunset clause. You don't have quotas forever.
Yes.
You have a quota only until the objectives have been achieved. If we do that, I don't see what's wrong with having a quota, because the number of women in positions of authority in this country is disproportionately small. It's very, very tiny. How many women federal court judges do we have? How many women CEOs? These are the questions we have to ask. And the government could play a major role in changing this. And they should have.
Yeah, since you raised the issue of quota, do you think we still need quota in public universities?
We need to have a look at the actual situation in this country. All right? And I think a lot of public universities actually don't have quotas anymore. Not direct quotas, okay? My feeling is that we don't need it anymore. All right? There's a definite difference between the economic situation of the nation in 2018 compared to 1970.
Yes.
There's a huge difference. All right? I don't think there is really a need for it. I mean, in terms of education, what we should be looking at is to make sure that every single school is of a high quality. right? So that means it doesn't matter if I am studying in Gua Cempedak in a small school, or if I'm in the heart of Petaling Jaya, the quality of education I have is the same. That is what's important, all right? In terms of scholarships, etc., I think it should be based on need. If your family are poor, you get scholarship. If your family has money, don't need lah. Just ask your dad or your mom, you know. So I don't see what's wrong with that. I think that's where we should be moving to. But your question is, should we have race-based policies?
Yes.
No, of course not. We should be moving away from this. And let me remind our listeners or watchers or is it
Audience.
they see us, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. Let me remind our viewers, okay, that the provisions in the Constitution which were placed to provide for race-based affirmative action, that was done in 1956, 57, right? Okay. At that time, when this was put in, the rulers of that time said that, okay, you have this now, but we've envisioned a time when the country doesn't need this anymore. So the ruling elite of that time didn't want this to be something which went on forever. So we have to look at things in an intelligent and in a calm manner and see whether, look, is this necessary now? If it's not, then we have to get rid of it. But the trouble is, you can't look at it in a calm manner because one, there are laws which are still preventing open discussion of this. The Sedition Act is one.
Okay.
And there are all these morons who will scream and shout without making any sense, which could muddy the waters. All right. But if we want to move forward, this is what we've got to do. We've got to be intelligent. We've got to be rational. We've got to be calm, and then we can move forward.
Okay. So you mentioned like a few bad laws, or a lot of bad laws are still in place, like the sedition law. So, you know, as a law teacher, what do you think that the new administration has to get rid of as soon as possible?
Well, like I said, the National Security Council Act, the Sedition Act. There are certain laws which have to be amended. You don't necessarily have to get rid of it. I think the University Colleges Act can be amended. It doesn't need to be repealed. The Printing Presses Publications Act, that has to change, particularly with regards to the power of the minister to withdraw the license. I mean, like Sinchu, they can withdraw your license tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Minister of Home Affairs now, isn't it? So that's Muhyiddin. Muhyiddin can withdraw your license tomorrow. I mean, he probably won't, but he still has that power, right? So that has to go. You know, so that's just 4 examples of laws which I think definitely either have to be repealed or to be changed.
You know, a lot of things about, we have bad laws, but also people have very little faith with our judiciary, with our legal system. Do you think the new government can restore this faith?
I think so. It might take a bit of time, but I do think so. It might require quite dramatic action. So, for example, the appointment of Tommy Thomas as Attorney General, that was quite dramatic because you're taking someone from outside the system, right? But I think that was necessary because in terms of the public's perception, they need to be sure that the Attorney General is not someone who's tainted by the previous regime, right? So, and this might be unfair. I mean, there might be really good people in the AG's chambers. I don't know. I don't know every single one of them.
Yes.
But the point is, the view of the people is that you were all part of that old gang, you know. So sometimes you need to do something drastic first to just get the ball rolling. All right. With regards to the judiciary, it's a bit more sensitive because on the one hand, the independence of the judiciary is still important. We don't want the government to be interfering too much in the judiciary, with the appointments, etc. But again, perhaps the one thing that they can consider is to be really drastic and using the current laws, appoint a new Chief Justice from someone who's outside from the judiciary.
Again?
Why not? Why not? Sometimes it needs someone from the outside to shake things up. Because if you're from within the institution, you know, everybody knows you, you've known everybody for years, you're friends, you know, it might be, it might be difficult for you to be the bad guy, you know, to say, look, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that. So it might be easier to get someone from outside who's willing to be the bad guy and just shake everything up. So that's one possibility. But that's only short term. In the medium term, we really need to find a manner where we can appoint judges in a way which is more independent from the executive.
Yeah, so I think a lot of time when people have no faith in our system, whether it's the judiciary or part of the enforcement, the whole legal system, it's also about the selective persecution of certain people or of certain fraction. But do you think, with today's latest development where we finally see Najib being arrested, slowly all this perception will be...
Yeah, I mean, it's a good start, isn't it? And it's not just him. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. You correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Issa Samad also arrested today?
Okay.
You better tell your people to check, and then they can speak in your earphone and confirm.
Yes, I think they hear you. I think they will be checking.
All right, let them check. We need to have a show of force against all forms of corruption. That's very, very important. There's no point catching the policeman who's taking 50 ringgit off you because you beat the red light. That's not, that's an issue, but that's no point. You got to, if the people high up, they haven't been convicted, if there are people high up who have committed gross corruption, and the accusations that we are seeing now, I mean, this is corruption on a biblical scale. If you don't catch these guys, then you don't have the moral authority to catch the little guys. And you're right, of course. The laws are always there, but they have been used selectively. Now it's time to make sure that whoever has committed an offense is charged and is given a fair trial, and if found guilty, is punished sufficiently.
Do you think we'll have more people, brought to justice for their mistakes?
Well, I mean, apparently there's over 1,000 people who are being investigated right now.
Yes.
That's a lot of people.
Yes.
And if you look at the money laundering law, you can be implicated quite easily. Just by having knowledge, if you're, for example, a bank officer, just by having knowledge that something is not right and not reporting it, that's an offense already. So I think it's possible that we could be faced with a severe prison shortage where there's just not enough space in prison anymore.
Interestingly, because when we interview Lim Kit Siang right after the election, he mentioned something like an amnesty program for those, especially who are involved in the corruption at different scale. Perhaps we should look into it.
That's a possibility. I mean, because a lot of the smaller figures might have felt that they had no choice. Right, because for fear of their own safety, for fear of for their jobs, for their futures. So no, that is something which has to be, some little bank officer.
Just a little bank officer.
He or she might be terrified. He or she might say, "Look, I know this is not right, but who do I talk to? I'm terrified." Right. So maybe let's not be mad about this. All right. But the key thing is the big players, those who actually got a lot of corrupt money or jewelry or tiaras or whatever.
Tiaras, right?
Yeah,
don't know why.
These are the ones that, there has to be a strong case against them. There has to be a lot of effort made to ensure that if they are guilty, they are found guilty and they're put away. Because I don't think the Malaysian public will settle for anything less.
So no immunity for Joe Lau?
No, definitely not. And I think he's from Penang, which is an embarrassment to me and every other Penang person. I mean, why can't he be from Perak or someplace like that? But yeah,
I don't think the Parakians will be happy.
I don't care.
Now.
I don't care.
They will give it back to you.
No,
Penang
I don't
Knights.
care. I don't care. But we've got to catch that fellow, man. Definitely.
Since we are talking about Penang, right?
Right.
We have a question from someone, from an audience from a viewer.
People watch this thing, is it?
People watch and they actually ask question on YouTube, so
right,
it's live.
Okay.
So people watch. Okay. Anyways, there's this one of our viewers, Ching An Lai. Lim Guan Eng recently getting backlash for using Chinese as one of his official statement. Even Mahathir said it's a minor mistake. What's your take on it?
It's a mountain out of a molehill. There's so many problems in this world, and that's what you want to pick on, is it? I mean, like, honestly, I mean, because it's the only thing that UMNO understands. Let's use race to make an issue, right? So they see Guan Eng using Mandarin, and I don't know what his reasons were, but it's just one post, you know, and don't do it again. I mean, what's the big deal? What is the big deal?
But do you think he should issue a Chinese press statement? Is it all right for him to issue?
I think he should issue a multilingual press statement.
Actually, he did.
Then what's the issue?
I think it was subsequently he was responding, and then he posted a pure Chinese response, and then it started to kick off.
Well, you know, it's such a silly, small thing. I speak English most of the time. There are certain circumstances where I'm supposed to speak Malay. You know, but I speak English anyway, right? I suppose they're going to be coming after my head as well now that I've admitted it. I mean, like, come on, you know, just grow up, you know, seriously, just grow up. Big deal, right? It's done, it's past, forget about it, it's no big deal. I mean, you got 1MDB scandal, you got Felda scandal, and Guan Eng is speaking in Mandarin. I mean, oh my God, get your priorities right, man.
Yeah, some of the critics of the new government actually think that by displaying all the, I like to call it loot, the tiaras and the handbags and everything, and you know, playing it on the media and all this thing and highlighting it is actually sort of like trying to deviate us from our attention or the public's attention from other issues.
Like what? What other issues? This is the issue. This is the biggest issue in the country today. What other issues are you talking about? I mean, if you're talking about why the country is in the state that it's in today, if you're talking about why UMNO Barisan Nasional lost, it's because of this. This is a huge, huge reason. Of course, it's the biggest issue at the moment. So detract us from what exactly? I don't know. I mean, you tell me.
You know, so I think they are very, these are the critics, they say, you know, it took you 2 months to put up a lineup, your cabinet lineup. You're not, you know, you're not in place, you know, you're not that efficient as we thought you are. And, you know, there were 20% of female and not 30% as promised. So, you know, instead of ensuring that they are delivering what they have promised. So I think that was what these critics are saying.
Yeah, okay. I mean, what's to stop you from going and criticizing them about what they haven't done? I mean, nothing's stopping you. You know, the press is freer now, right?
You think we are living in a freer world?
I think the feeling is that we are.
But the law is still there.
Exactly. So that's why it has to go. Because no matter how fantastic you feel now, the power still rests in the government to do stuff to you, right? And you don't want them to have that power.
Wow. Okay.
No, of course not.
No, I mean there's another question.
Oh, really?
Another proof to let you know that people are watching.
So there are two viewers, is it?
I'm sure there are more than that. Okay, so what is your expectation on public university after the change of government, academic freedom? Oh, I was about to ask you this. Okay, since...
Well, we've got to change the vice-chancellors because the vice-chancellors are primarily chosen by the previous government. Which means to say that they were chosen not so much based on their ability, but based on their loyalty.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm being brutal here. Maybe some are able, but they're also loyal. Who knows? Okay, but I think that the primary concern about the previous government with regards to public universities is to ensure that the top management are loyal to them. All right? So we have to look at that. I mean, we have to look at the way vice-chancellors are appointed because what we need are really good, strong academic administrators who understand what the values of academia is. All right? They have to be highly qualified, they have to be intelligent, they have to have the EQ to deal with academics because academics are the most difficult people to deal with. All right, we're all stubborn, we're all individualistic, you know, so it's quite difficult to deal with us. So to have quality vice-chancellors is the first order of the day. All right, then they can set the tone. If the VC is the one who says, look, I will defend your freedom, I will defend your academic freedom. As long as what you say is academically sound, the university is behind you. We just need someone to say that. That's all we need. All right? That's the first point. The second one is, of course, we've got to get rid of some of the laws. All right? And the biggest law, which is a problem for us, apart from the AUKU, the University Colleges Act, that affects the students more than it affects us, the academics. With regards to the academics, is the Statutory Bodies Discipline Surcharge Act, which is the most ridiculous law in the world. Okay, because it's the only law where under the discipline section, an employee of a statutory body, and public universities are statutory bodies, cannot criticize government policy. Cannot. That means I don't really have a purpose, because my job is to criticize things. All right? And secondly, even if you want to praise government policy, you must get permission first. Only law in the world where if you want to praise someone, you got to ask them, hello sir, can I praise you please? I mean, this is a ridiculous law which can be used against us. It's a complete assault on freedom, academic freedom. That has to change. Now, we don't have to change the law. We just have to exempt universities from that section.
This is quite interesting. I would like to, since when is this law being enacted?
The early 2000s, because it was actually made in response to the Reformasi movement. And actually, what they were aiming at was statutory bodies like Dewan Bahasa Pustaka, because they found that the employees were against the government, right? So they wanted to control the employees. They wanted to control the political motivations of the employees because they were opposition supporters. But unfortunately, this rather obtuse law has encompassed universities as well, because strictly speaking, we are statutory bodies. But by having a law which controls what you can or cannot say, especially for those of us in the social sciences, you are saying you're trying to control our work, and you can control our work. All right? So this is a really, really ridiculous law which has to go. Or at least has to be amended to exempt universities from it. In fact, I think it should just be destroy the whole law. Just get rid of it. It's useless. Why should the other members? Why should other members of statutory bodies
so
be
now you
restricted
change
either?
your mind?
No, I
It
changed
has
my
to be
mind. No,
repealed.
just get rid of it, the whole thing. Forget it. Just get rid of it.
Okay, since it has been around since year 2000, and you have been teaching far longer than that, it has not stopped you from voicing out. Why so?
Because this is my job. This is my responsibility. My responsibility as a law teacher is to not just teach the students what the law is. My responsibility is also to teach them what the law should be. My responsibility is to teach them what the law should not be. My responsibility is to write about these things. So if I don't do these things, I'm not living up to my responsibility. And my responsibility is not to UMNO, it's not to DAP, it's not
Or
to...
even the government?
It's not to... No, my responsibility is to the people. Because it's the people who pay taxes, and it's their taxes which pay my wage.
Yeah, the reason that I want to ask you this is I'm sure that, if the environment is so restrictive of you expressing your voices or expressing yourself, I'm sure that, throughout the years someone has come and tell you whether, it's in goodwill to tell you, hey, maybe you shouldn't be so vocal.
No, I mean, like, I've
no one has ever done that.
Of course they have, but no one has ever done that nicely like that. I mean, like, I've had a few show cause letters, but I think I've had 3. Well, 2 show cause letters, and one time I was actually called by the Vice Chancellor and scolded. But it's nothing, it's no big deal. Show cause letter is no big deal. So long as you can justify what you did, there's no need to be worried. All right, okay. Just if you're worried all the time, then you'll achieve nothing. You'll get nowhere if you're just scared and scared and scared all the time, right? But make sure that whatever you do, you can justify it. All right, and whatever you say, you can justify. You cannot go on and say stupid things. All right. The only limit to my freedom as an academic is my own stupidity.
Okay.
All right. The limit should not be my university. The limit should not be my government. If I say something which is not backed up, then by all means you can criticize me. You can not promote me. You can say I'm useless. Fine. All right. That's fair, But I refuse to accept that my freedom can be controlled.
Okay, so do you think, right, by the way of you conducting yourself, you have inspired a lot more of students, because obviously they are a victim of AUKU and all these things also. Do you think that you have inspired them to be able to voice out themselves?
I don't know. My students tend to fall asleep in my class, so I'm not quite sure whether that...
Why? You're so funny, I think.
No, I don't know, man. I mean, that's you got to ask my students. I mean, I can't answer that. It's so arrogant, so pretentious.
Okay, yeah, but you don't think that you have inspired them to be like a little bit bolder or more courageous in expressing themselves?
Well, I hope that my students have learned.
Or the system is actually too restrictive that, you know, even if you are doing that, a lot of people are like worried that they are the price they have to pay.
I think the most important thing is that as a teacher, you must give them another viewpoint. You must give them a way of looking at things from a different perspective. All right? So if we were just to take the old government's perspective, their narrative, then laws like the old ISA, for example, is perfectly justified. Right? So you've got to show them an alternative. You've got to say, look, I don't think it's justified. I think it's oppressive. I think it's very cruel for these reasons. You know? And that's our job. What they do with it, that's up to them. They're grown men and women, you know. And I don't know. I don't know. I hope so, but, you know, that's all we can do. I don't have a sort of like, you know, inspire meter where I just, you know, check whether my students are inspired or not. I don't have a device, you know, at the end of the class. Are they inspired? I don't know. You gotta, you know, next time you call one of them, talk to them.
I'll try to. Okay. Yeah, so you think the local students are critical enough?
They're getting more critical because you cannot stop them from learning things. All right? Because when I started teaching in 1990, information was very difficult to get.
Yes.
All right? Especially information which was not part of what the government wants you to hear. Right? You had those days 3 TV channels, all controlled. The newspapers after Operation Lalang of 87 were terrified. So they were all very meek and mild, and you know, until fairly recently they're still quite meek and mild. You know, and that's it. Those are your sources of information. How do you get an alternative viewpoint? I could count on one hand the number of publications which provided an alternative viewpoint. You had Aliran, you had maybe the Consumers of Association of Penang's paper, maybe the Rocket if you can find it. You know, the political party, but the political party papers are political party papers. You know, there's propaganda. But in terms of actual analysis and all that, maybe 2 that I can think of, right? Aliran and CAP. Can you imagine? That's all you had, right? But ever since the last 10 years, you know, you turn on your phone and you've got, you know, a world of information. So students today are so much more better informed than they were when I first started. I'm not saying that they're more intelligent, but they're just much more better informed. So of course, when you're better informed, you can be more critical because you know there's another viewpoint out there.
Okay. Yeah. I've got a third viewer actually.
Yeah, okay. That's nice.
So Sunny, his question is, what's your thought of elite has to follow the majority's favor when come to managing the country?
Okay, the voice of the people is important. It's important to hear what people want, and it's important to hear the viewpoint of people at many different levels of government. Okay, on a very simple level, for example, you can be talking about local government in terms of say development projects. You know, it's only right that residents are given the proper opportunity to have a meaningful submission of ideas. You know, that's at a very small local level. On a bigger level, I mean, you could even have a referendum. You know, if the issue is big enough, right? Yes. Although referendum can backfire, like Brexit.
Yeah.
Okay, but at the end of the day, governments are there to make decisions. And your decision making must be based on what you think is best. And the thing is, if it doesn't go with what people want, and if it doesn't provide good results, then they can vote you out. That's the whole purpose of democracy. That's why ultimately we can vote you out. Yes, we must have a right to voice our views. We must have the avenues with which to give our views to the government, but at the end of the day, the government is the one that has to make the decision. And if it's a bad decision, if it's a wrong decision, then we punish them.
I mean, I think it's just my guess. I think Sunny's question will be more driving towards populist politicians, like, you know, like the Minister of Defense, which we all loved, and he might make wrong decision, but we are particularly forgiving towards him. Or
Because he's so cute.
well, that's one, but maybe we are very forgiving towards, a lot of people are very forgiving towards our Prime Minister as well.
What, the current one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they love him so much right now, right?
Yeah.
No. I mean, like, you can be, and Malaysians are forgiving, right? We forgive a lot. You know, we forgive 2.6 billion sins if we have to. All right, but
that's just, we are forgetful.
exactly.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, like, no, I mean, yeah. If a politician is a populist politician, there's a difference between being popular and being populist.
Yes.
Right? So you're populist because people just like you. If you're populist, that means you're pandering to the lowest common denominator. If they do that and the results are awful, then we'll know that it doesn't work. That's why the whole democratic process is so important. That's why it's important to have a free press so that people can criticize this, you know, so you could have a populist policy, which is absolutely useless. But we need Sintrujit Po, we need all these newspapers to have writers who are willing and, you know, willing and able to say, look, this is terrible. You know, so I don't really see a problem in that, because if our democratic space is open enough, the morons will be uncovered.
But you know, you have written a lot. I mean, you have written a lot about how our culture, and also in particular to how feudalistic Malaysians are.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about in this scenario? We are so feudalistic that we will think our leaders do no wrong.
Well, not all of us are like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, you have people
that's
like
true.
me. I don't have a feudal bone in my body. And then lots more other people who are like that, who will be there to say, no, listen, come on, this is not right. Okay, but yes, you are correct. We are very feudalistic. We tend to listen to our leaders, whoever they may be. We tend to go mad once our leaders are in power and we feel that they can do no wrong. And there's a tendency to not accept any criticism of your party or your leader at all. Okay, now the thing is, there'll always be hardcore people like that. All right, there will always be the hardcore supporters of Bersatu, the hardcore supporters of Amanah, the hardcore supporters of MCA, who will hear nothing wrong about their leaders. Okay, fine. Look, this is a big world. We have
And
space for
UMNO
everyone.
also.
UMNO, of course, lah. you know. But like I said, it doesn't really matter. You know, it doesn't really matter so long as the democratic space is open enough so that all kinds of views can be heard. That's what's important. You know, we can't change society overnight. You know, this takes time, and and Malaysians, we need to slowly but surely understand that those we elected in power are there because of us. Okay, they're not some sort of demigod. All right, they're just a person which we think is best to do that job, and if we don't like them anymore, we get rid of them. If they're doing something wrong, we can say it. All right, that's not an issue. That's not a problem. Okay, but yeah, I mean, we tend to respect our leaders too much. Okay, I think that's definitely a problem.
But you do agree that we need check and balance, right?
Of course, lah.
Yeah, but when the parliament goes into session, you will see a very weak opposition. Don't you worried about this?
Well, they're not getting their act together, isn't it?
Yeah, and you said, I mean,
Okay, look, in the short term, I don't think it's a problem.
short term.
In the short term, I think I'm talking about the next 6 months, 1 year, 1 year and a half. I don't think it's a problem, because we cannot. Because look, we have no choice. The opposition parliament is weak unless there's some mad jumping going on, which you never know in Malaysia. It could happen. All right, but so what? We've had weak oppositions in the past. Okay, but it's always been society and people in society who've acted as the opposition, who've acted as the watchdog. And we have to continue doing that. All right? But the trouble is, the opposition has not got their act together. Okay? UMNO has just elected Zahid Hamidi as their president, which means what? They want to stick to the same old thing. That's what they're comfortable with, their own style, their old way of doing things. All right? This is what they're happy with. That means, okay, fine. This is not what the people want. You know? So I don't see them changing at all. All right? So as long as they don't change, I can't see how, you know, how they're going to be a good enough opposition. For one thing, you know, you need to have people who are intelligent in opposition, right? You need opposition which makes intelligent opposing remarks, not just screaming and shouting and being rude. You know, I can't imagine a lot of UMNO fellows being able to do that, to actually put together 2 sentences of any sense, so
KJ can do that actually.
Oh yeah, KJ. But maybe he'll drink the wrong Kool-Aid and get all confused again. I don't know.
Well, actually, my 4th viewer.
They're all rolling in now.
Okay, I'm sure the producer didn't make all this up. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Chong Sian Lim. It's actually with recent choice of newly elected UMNO president. What's your view on the mindset of Malay community? You have answered this. When do you think they would be ready for a change and be more acceptant towards the minority race?
Well, Chong, the thing is, the UMNO presidential election reflects what UMNO members think. It doesn't reflect the entire demographic of Malay people. I think the last election has shown that many are fed up with the way things are. Maybe they're more fed up with the corruption, or maybe they haven't really embraced the idea of a more inclusive, pluralistic, multicultural, multi-religious country. That's possible. I agree, but these things take time. I wouldn't be too negative about the results of the UMNO election, because these are UMNO people who made these choices.
Okay.
It's not every single Malay person in the country. So Chong, chill, dude. Just chill.
So you kind of expected that of them.
Of course. They've been doing this for the past 60 years. This is the only thing that they're used to. This is the only life they're used to. It's like you put someone from Malaysia who's eaten nothing but rice all his life, and you put them in the UK or the US or something. Someone serves potatoes. I can't eat that. I'm not used to this. I need my rice. And that's like UMNO. That's their rice.
Well, maybe they can, find something closer to rice, risotto maybe.
Oh, quinoa.
Well, the general public can't really afford that as staple,
Yeah, I think these UMNO fellows can. Anyway, yeah.
Okay. We touched on about race and how the mentality of the Malays, or a fraction of them, the UMNO Malays. But when the candidacy of Tommy Thomas was raised, or it became an issue.
Of course, it will always be an issue.
Because he's non-Muslim,
Yeah, exactly. There will always be people who will make these things an issue. All right? I bet you something as simple as having a non-Malay vice chancellor, someone will make an issue.
Oh.
I'm sure. Because there are people out there who will make this an issue. Right? The point is that this is the reality. Tommy has got to do a good job. That's it. He's got to prove that he can do a good job. Guaneng has got to do a good job. Gobin has got to do a good job. Teresa has got to do a good job. These people just have to shut the detractors up by doing a good job, by being fair, by being just, by proving that, look, race really doesn't matter. Okay? When you've had race-based politics for so long, when decisions are made, policy, government decisions made based on race, this ethnicity cannot hold this position. When you've had that for so long, this is what people are used to. We have now to show them a different paradigm. The responsibility of this government, the responsibility for any progressive Malaysians, is to prove that we have a different way of doing things, and it's a better way of doing things. That's what has to be done now.
Okay, but I think, this is one thing. You have also, written about Malaysia being a secular nation. Yeah, but I think one of the issues now, it's about the child marriage. How do you actually reconcile this? There's no reconciliation.
There's no reconciliation. Any child under the age of 18 should not be allowed to get married.
With or without consent of the
It
parents.
doesn't matter. And I think any sexual act with any child under the age of 16 is rape. Okay? It's as simple as that. Okay? And I don't care about any other thing. All right? As far as I'm concerned, that is the law, that is the way it should be, that is the international standards, and that is what is right. Okay? So if there's any law which contradicts this, that has to go. That has to go. We cannot make any exceptions.
When people raise religion and stuff like that to resist passing law to ban child marriage, what will you tell these people?
I would tell them, look, you are looking at rules which were made in a different era. Okay? And it's not just Islam, right? I mean, like, there are child brides in over every single culture.
Yes.
Okay? And I would make the same arguments against every single culture. All right? Because maybe 700 years ago, 800 years ago, at the age of 12, you maybe have another 12 years to live, right? The whole idea is to make some babies and get on with your life, right? Nowadays, a 12-year-old still has got to go to school, right? Still has so much schooling to do in order to prepare him or her for the life ahead. They have a childhood ahead of them. We have to protect our children, okay? I'm thinking about our young people, our children, and how the law is there to protect them. And you know, and I cannot accept anything which takes away the protection of our children, all our children.
Okay, so you know, in terms of human rights and all this issue, yeah, there are some hopeful signs of them saying that, you know, we will repeal or whatever that is non-conforming to the human rights standard internationally. But do you foresee any of it that is very particularly hard to get rid of?
Any laws, you mean?
Yeah, any laws or any practices, perhaps child marriage, this one.
Yeah.
It has taken us so long.
Yeah. And unfortunately, okay, look, I mean, the thing is, there has, with regards to child marriage, and I think it's allowed under Sharia laws, right? If the father
Yeah.
gives permission, that kind of thing. There has to be arguments made. Unfortunately, I mean, I would rather it didn't come down to this. I would rather that, you know, people are able to listen to reason. But it's up to, you know, progressive scholars, Islamic scholars, to come up, unfortunately, with a line of reasoning which can be acceptable by even the orthodox. That is one way of doing it. You know, my arguments are made purely based on what I consider to be right and just. You know, I don't quote the Quran, I don't quote the Bible, I don't quote any religious text. All right. Like I said, you know, think about it. By and large, a 13-year-old Malaysian girl is just barely stopped playing with dolls, needs to study, needs to have a life, needs to have a future. You know, we've got to protect them, right? Are you telling me we don't have to? You know, and because you say you're doing it for religious reasons, your reasons are better than mine? Okay, fine. If that's the way you think. Well, I don't think so. And we have to, you know, we just have to keep on pushing this argument, and hopefully the majority of the population say, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you just look at your 12-year-old girl. If you have a child, you look at her 12 and think, all right, okay, she's ready to get married and to have children. Really? Seriously?
Okay, all right. You know, I'm not going to hold you up too long so that you can go back and sleep a while before the 2 o'clock
Yes,
match.
that's very important.
Yes, but maybe this, as a conclusion of this discussion, do you think you can give some word of advice or maybe to any of the younger Malaysians in this new country? Yeah, new.
I think I don't like advising people, but just look what the people of this country has achieved. You know, we are the only country in Southeast Asia to have changed a regime which has lasted over 60 years.
Yes, that's amazing.
So peacefully. It was as if, you know, everybody was happy, yeah, but it wasn't like madness, right? Everybody, you know, after the election, and then when the EC finally released the results, everybody was in shock. Everybody, you know, people who voted against the government were in shock. They were so happy. Most people did not expect this to happen. I did not expect this to happen in my lifetime. All right? And it happened. But then the next day, people went to, you know, there was no work, holiday. It wasn't as if people were shooting fireworks and going mad. I said, oh, cool, we got a new government. Isn't this cool? That's the way it should be. It's so strange that one of the least democratic countries in this world, the people have shown the world how democracy should work.
Okay. The people. The power of people.
That's us.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a great stop for our discussion today. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we have more than 4 audience, I'm sure. OK 各位观众朋友，谢谢大家今晚的收看。那刚才听过了刚才我们这个Prof Azmi Sharom 的一些言论，我觉得也真的开启了我们可能一些就是对这个新马来西亚的一些观点。那我们百格呢将继续带来更多精彩的访谈，所以请留意 On the Hot Seat。我们再会。